We're going to talk about the 3 most common mistakes that ruin your pool water in this video, and we're going to show you how to avoid them from happening so you can have perfect, clear pool water all summer long. One of those mistakes is something that most pool owners are doing every single week, and it is destroying their pool water quality. We're going to show you exactly what that is and how to avoid it. The first one is something that most pool companies are not telling their customers, and it could be costing you hundreds of dollars every year. We're going to tell you exactly what that is and how to avoid it. And then the last one is going to be the most surprising one, and it might even shock you, but it's something that you can easily fix if you know what to look for. If you guys are ready to dive in and get started, go ahead and hit that like button. Now let's jump into the 3 biggest mistakes that are ruining your pool water. The number 1 mistake that we see pool owners making over and over again is using too much chlorine. They think that more is better when it comes to chlorine, but that is not the case. And it is actually hurting your pool water quality. When you add chlorine to your pool, the chlorine combines with water and it creates a byproduct called hypochlorous acid. Hypochlorous acid is what actually sanitizes and disinfects your pool water. Now, it's important to note that there are different types of chlorine that you can put into your pool. There's granular chlorine, which is calcium hypochlorite, which is a pretty quick-acting chlorine that will raise your chlorine level really fast. You also have liquid chlorine, which is sodium hypochlorite. This is basically like bleach for your swimming pool. It will also raise your chlorine level pretty quickly. And then you have chlorine tablets, which are typically trichloroisocyanuric acid. These are slow-dissolving chlorine that are meant to keep a residual amount of chlorine in your pool at all times. So let's say you put 10 gallons of liquid chlorine into your pool, which is pretty common. That's going to raise your chlorine level to about 10 parts per million, which is a lot. And when that happens, you start getting a lot of that hypochlorous acid turning into its other form, called chloric acid. Chloric acid is very unstable, and it can cause a lot of problems in your pool water, including burning out your chlorine faster and creating what's called combined chlorine. Combined chlorine is basically when the chlorine has combined with something else in the water, and it's no longer available to sanitize and disinfect your pool. So when you have high levels of combined chlorine in your pool, you're going to notice some not-so-good things, including your pool is going to have a little bit of a chlorine smell, but it's not going to feel sanitized. Also, if you have any cuts or any open sores, it's going to sting when you get into the pool. That means that your chlorine level might be high, but it's not actually doing anything to sanitize your pool. What we recommend instead is using a test strip. You can get these at almost any pool store. And before you add any chlorine to your pool, you want to check that free chlorine level and make sure that you're not adding any more chlorine until that free chlorine level gets back down below 3 parts per million. The ideal range for free chlorine is between 1 and 3 parts per million. But you definitely don't want to go above that because it's going to start creating a lot of those combined chlorine issues that we talked about. The next most common mistake that we see people doing is not shocking their pool often enough. Now, when you shock your pool, you're raising that chlorine level up really high to kill off all the contaminants in your pool. Now, it's important to note that you should never shock your pool while you have people swimming in it, but shocking your pool after everyone's done swimming is going to help kill off those contaminants, like we said, that have been building up during the day, during the week, and they're making your pool cloudy, they're making your pool feel slimy, and they're making your pool smell. You want to shock your pool anytime that you have a heavy bather load, meaning that you have a lot of people swimming in your pool, or if you notice that your pool is getting cloudy, or your pool is getting a little bit slimy, or a little bit of a chlorine smell. Those are all signs that you need to shock your pool. Now, you might be asking yourself, how often do I need to shock my pool? And it all depends on how many people are getting into your pool and how often you're using your pool. But a good rule of thumb is to shock your pool once a week. If you have a heavy bather load, meaning you have a lot of kids, you're having parties, you're swimming in it every single day, you probably should be shocking your pool more than once a week. Now, there are 2 different types of pool shocks that you can use. One is a granular shock. which is usually potassium monopersulfate. That's a great option to shock your pool because it's quick-acting. It's going to dissolve pretty quickly into your pool water and start working right away. The other option you have is a liquid shock, which is usually a solution of sodium chloride and some other chemicals in there as well. Liquid shock tends to last a little bit longer in your pool water, so it's going to keep working for a little bit longer. Either way you go, you want to follow the instructions on the packaging or on the bottle to make sure that you're putting the proper amount into your pool. Adding too much shock to your pool is not going to hurt anything, but it's definitely not going to help either. So always follow the directions to make sure you're putting the proper amount in your pool. The third most common mistake that we see people making is not balancing their water. If you're not balancing your pool water, it's going to lead to a lot of other problems, including staining, scaling, and it's not going to allow your chlorine to effectively sanitize and disinfect your pool water. Most people think that balancing your pool water just means adjusting that pH level to keep it between 7.2 and 7.8. But there's actually a lot more to it than that. There's other chemicals that you need to adjust as well. One chemical is the alkalinity. Alkalinity is a measure of how well buffered your pool water is. What we mean by that is if you were to add acid to your pool, how much is that pool water going to resist that change in pH? If your alkalinity is too low, your pool water is not going to be buffered at all. So if you were to add acid or base to your pool water, it's going to change the pH drastically. But if your alkalinity is too high, it's going to be the opposite. Your pool water is not going to accept any acid, and it's going to make it really hard to lower that pH level. The ideal range for alkalinity is between 80 and 120 parts per million. The other thing you need to adjust is your calcium hardness. Calcium hardness is basically how much calcium is in your pool water. This is going to prevent your pool from getting all sorts of scaling. If you have low calcium hardness, you're going to have a lot of scaling on your heater, you're going to have a lot of scaling on your pump, and it's just not good for your equipment. Ideally, you want your calcium hardness between 200 and 400 parts per million. But here's the kicker. A lot of pool companies are not telling their customers that they need to adjust those levels, and they're making them pay a ton of money for chemicals every single week without telling them why they're actually doing it. If you're balancing your pool water properly, you shouldn't have to add a bunch of chemicals every single week. If you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button, and we'll see you guys in the next one.